We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey everybody, Will here. Thanks for joining. Today we've got Mike Pedrick. Mike, how you doing? Let's give a little 30 second spiel of who you are and why we care.
Sure. Well, I mean, caring is up to you, I suppose. But I've been in the consulting game in one fashion or another for, 19 years. I started in IT right at the end of the dot-com bubble bursting. So I missed out on the glory days where you could get a six-figure salary for not knowing how to locate the power button on a PC. Yeah, so I got into information security a number, it'd be 17 or 18 years ago now. The outcome of a audit that was initiated by the insurance provider for a organization I was an IT executive for. And, I figured if I'm this ignorant about the subject matter and I think very highly of myself, clearly there's going to be some opportunities for helping other folks in the mid-market and South space. And so I've been doing consulting, like I said, for quite a while now. And I'm also, in addition to my role as a consultant, I'm also an accredited trainer for ISACA, an ISACA chapter board member, and I also contract with organizations to teach other programs outside of ISACA's sphere, like CISSP and CompTIA's Security Plus and so on and so forth. So largely because I think that the best way to really know something is to share it with others. And it's a phenomenal networking opportunity. Really great to see. Really great way to interface with much smarter folks than myself while I'm at the front of the room babbling. So
That's funny. Yeah, it's great. I think when we get to, I don't want to say our age, but once you get tenured in the industry, you realize how necessary it is to share that information out and educate, and also how fun it is. Like, honestly, at a certain point, because I'm sure as we chat through this stuff, we're going to have a lot of people listening are going to hear us saying things that they've probably heard before, that we've been saying over and over, because not a lot changes really. It's still just kind of about risk, right?
It does seem that way.
So we're chatting today about client relationships around the managed services space, managed security services space. So I guess just to kind of kick that off, in your experience, what are those most common challenges that maybe organizations aren't aware or don't know how to deal with, right? They certainly should be aware of them.
I think I'll open this up by saying that I've written about this fairly often, the notion of building a better client. And the genesis of this has been that, if you go all the way back to the beginning of our IT journey, information technology journey as we know it, us old guys at this point, it's that IT was always a department where you rang a bell and an automaton came out from the back of the room and they shoved you out of your chair, the Jimmy Fallon character on SNL. And just completely lacking in tact and social skills and sense of arrogance or borderline belligerence about technology and whatnot. And I have always, relentlessly pushed back on this, even from when I started. And for what it's worth, I had a career path before IT that was very business focused, and maybe that sort of shaped some of my approach to this. But the biggest issue that I think that I see in the relationship, the dynamic between service providers, be they security focused or otherwise, and the customer is that on the one side, you have the service provider that sort of rolls their eyes and says, I wish my clients were smarter about these things. Ignoring, of course, like if they were, they wouldn't need you. Let's set that aside for a moment. And then on the other side of that transaction, you have the client that says something very similar. I'm not getting the service I think I'm owed for my hard-earned money each month. What am I doing with this organization? And so it becomes a game of musical chairs between, a customer goes from organization A to organization B to organization C, and never really finding the dynamic that they want. And so this concept of the build a better client is based around the idea that if you want, as a provider, if you want a better client, make the client better. I mean, holy cow. Pick up the phone, call them up, say, this is what I'm seeing in your environment, or let's have a conversation about a thing that's outside the bounds of the MSA or whatever the case may be. And similarly to a client, and maybe I'll get laser focused, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I'll say, as a service provider, if you're responsible for the backups of your client, for example, and you're maintaining 4 weeks worth of backups, is that sufficient? Is that enough? Well, rather than find out that it's not 6, 9, 10 months down the road, pick up the phone and ask, right? And if the client says, oh gosh, no, 4 weeks isn't going to do it for me, I need more like 3 months. Well, that's your opportunity. That's an upsell opportunity. And I'm not here to espouse the virtues
Mhm.
of upsell and so on and so forth. But I am saying that the easiest way to lose a customer is to fall short of their expectations. And if it's a
Mhm.
phone call away to level set on those expectations, God, make that phone call. Make it right away.
Yeah, I love yeah, I'm like you, the same mindset. It's like, yes, what I'm doing when I talk to clients a lot is upselling, but it's not the reason I'm doing it. It's because the more security you do, the more it's going to cost. That's just the nature of the
Mhm.
beast. We want you to do the right things. And it's funny because when you said that at the beginning, I wish I had smarter clients. My first inclination was, well, you're supposed to educate them, right? That's
Right.
something I think service providers forget, and that in itself, not calling it upselling, but that's again just highlighting the fact of what they need to be doing and what they should be doing, understanding the risks that are inherent with doing business this way versus doing business that way, right? And all you have to do
Yep.
is educate them about it. And if they can't if you're like, hey, here's the thing that, like you said, well, you don't the backups aren't sufficient, but we can help you by doing more. And they're like, well, we can't afford that. Well, okay, let's dig into that. Like,
Right.
where is there something else that we can do from a compensating control standpoint? What is it that about it you need? Maybe we need to refine how we're doing it. Is it amount of I mean, there's ways to solve the problem without it just being, we're not just adding chrome wheels to the vehicle, right?
Right.
We're
Right.
solving the problem.
Right. We're not selling spinner rims here. Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. Whenever there's a dissonance or a friction between the customer and the service provider, there should be an honest conversation around, we're not trying to thin it to win it or give away services. That's not sustainable from the provider's
Mhm.
standpoint. It's very rarely a question of cost. It's a question of value. And so if we can come to some agreement on, again, staying within the realm of backups, okay, well, we can't meet your 3 months with your budget. Maybe there's a strategy for, as you say, like change the cadence of the backups, the structure of the backups, or the time frame. But fundamentally, the service provider should be honest enough to be able to say, but that has consequences. If you have compliance risk because you're not maintaining data for a period of time, or so on and so forth. And I suppose that's as good a place as any to put a pin in this as well. That there's a lot of MSPs out there that have started in the game. I want to be judicious about how I say this. I don't want to be reductive in any way against MSPs, but they are the IT as a service folks, right? We're providing
100%.
IT, right? But what that means is, in the ears of the customer, that's IT, that's information security, it's compliance, it's risk management. It's never having to worry about anything related to technology, or really anything that's got electricity coursing through it in some cases. And master services agreements are, they go through the attorneys and they will write that document such that there are limits of liability on the part of the
Mhm.
service provider. That's a natural thing. It's a necessary thing for the provider to stay in business. But it should be also incumbent on the MSP. I'm going to leave out that second S, to establish those guardrails, right? Like I'm focused on availability for your organization because I'm providing infrastructure support and I'm providing a service desk and so on and so forth. But I'm partnered with an organization that understands security and risk and compliance and privacy and so on and so forth. And they're going to be bolted onto our service. I can tell you right now, there's going to be people that are going to hear me say that and go, "Oh God, that is absolutely the worst when it's just bolted on. It's kind of it's like a barnacle on the
It's
side
a
of a boat."
partnership.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. But listen, if the alternative is an IT shop trying to do
Mhm.
justice to
Which
those
we see a lot
subjects,
of right now, a lot of that.
yes, exactly, exactly. So I think that partnership is super valuable.
Yeah, yeah, the security space, the what I call the channel, right? The MSP space, the VAR space, all of those other kind of uh, other ways that organizations buy and sell technology have realized that there's an opportunity for security, and so now they're all trying to get into it and find different ways. Whether that is just like you said, bolting it on, but again, that's when you were talking earlier that about hey, we can't handle the backup thing because it doesn't fit in your price range. But I think it's good for service providers to realize you're never going to be everything to anyone, right? They're always going
Right.
to have other partners, and it's okay to be like, we can't do that, or we can't do that for that price, but we know somebody who can, and we work with them,
Mhm.
right? Or say, well, hey, have you thought about doing, again, finding ways to partner with the other organizations, right? You don't have to do it all yourself, for sure.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
let me ask about, so like kind of going on the inverse side, because we've talked a lot about making a smarter client.
Mhm.
I always, we've both worked at I've worked MSSPs and MSPs, right? Understanding that, we all want to do like what we say and do may be on the front exactly that, but the back end
Right.
may not always be pretty.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So how do you balance that transparency, but also still kind of build that trust and educate, all that stuff that we want on the client side? Um,
So I'm gonna make a bold statement that might get me into trouble later on, but I'm going to say that as a managed security services provider, some providers have tremendous catalogs. Some of them have a very minor catalog. Maybe they're just doing
mhm.
SOC as a service or something along that line. Whatever it is that you put into your product catalog, it behooves you to do well, or don't just go away, right? Just bow out. And so I have a finite amount of patience for organizations that are not committed to doing the thing they advertise well. Now,
Mhm.
I don't want you to be the best, right? I heard somebody say once, if you're not first, best, or only, just don't. And I think that's
It's the
problematic
opposite.
too,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that there's a wide swath of the market that doesn't care if you're first, best, or only. They still have money for you, right? You meet their needs, you take care of what they need, and they will pay their bills every month. Promise. I don't know the first, best, or only roofer, but if I need a roof put on my house, I'm calling somebody.
Right.
You know, and so, or probably more importantly, my insurance carriers calling. Anyway, so as far as service providers are concerned, I think that it comes down to a matter of commitment and the basics. If I ask a question of a service provider, what is the mechanism by which we get the inventory of the client's environment, right? Easy peasy, first domain of the CIS critical security controls list. If that service provider says to me, well, we get it at onboarding, my immediate next question is going to be, how often is it revisited? And if that service provider's response is, it's not, sorry, you are falling down on the job, right? I fully appreciate that it takes effort and it takes human beings, it takes personnel to manage those relationships in that fashion. Um, but that's table stakes. You do it.
Mm.
You just do. And this, again, leaning into the concept of the build a better client, it's supposed to be both directions. If I call the client and I say, "Hey, has there been any changes in the last 3 years, 2 years, whatever the time frame is?" You
Yeah.
know what they're going to say. First thing out of their mouth is going to be,
Duh.
"Yes." Right. And the second thing is going to be, "And how do you not know about this?" I expect you to tell me when there's been changes.
Right.
So it's as much as anything, I look at it as a CYA as a provider, right? You want to be a services provider, you just do the things. It's a cost of doing business. Somebody is on the phone reaching out to customers. And so I find it frustrating when I see organizations that don't have a I'm going to use some tired cliches here, right? Some client success folks, account
Mhm.
executive folks. Realistically, put it whatever label you want on them. They are a human being that is responsible for the destiny and the relationship between the provider and the customer. And
Right.
if that role doesn't exist, I have all manner of concerns about the way in which that provider is going to function.
Yeah, it's I'm doing some engagement now and building a program, and that's the first thing I did. Is like I need an asset inventory, and if you don't have one, I'm gonna interview and grab one or use technology and get everything I can, and that's step one to building a program.
Yeah.
And for the service providers, that's where your money is too, because you're probably at this stage, most everybody's pricing by endpoint, or no, by user, not endpoint anymore. They're most of them are going by user count. Um, but if you want to know how things are scaling, right, you need to have insight into that environment because that's the other thing too. There's one, you need to know what's going on inside your customer environment proactively,
Mhm.
and two, it's that
Mhm.
setting expectations. I can't tell you how many times um, I've had a client call, the SOC or the MSSP side of the house and be like, why didn't you guys see this? Why isn't that? And we're like, well,
Right.
so and so didn't know that wasn't onboarded, or this is new things, and you guys didn't tell. I'm like, man,
Right.
you have to, or just them thinking that making that assumption. Because if you're not doing that, if you're not going to proactively update the asset management, then they need to know that. If you're not going to be responsible for this kind of stuff or that kind of stuff, you know,
Mhm.
remediation was the big one back in the day, and even still today, I think there's problems with clients assume that like, oh, if something goes wrong, especially in the mid market and the small market, oh, something goes wrong, you're going to help me, cool, sign the line, and they don't
Right.
realize that help is going to stop at a certain point, or there's
Mhm.
going to be additional costs with it. And so you have to sit down and make those expectations known.
Right, or response times, like, "What do
Yeah.
you mean I can't call you at 2 o'clock in the morning?" Right? "Stuff's on fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, why won't you pick up the phone?" Well, that's not the same contract you signed for. Remember when we
Mhm.
had the conversation about this was the price for this and here's the price for that? Guess what? It was under that, not this, right? Transparency, I mean, you invoked that word right away.
Mhm.
Transparency is the jam here. You have to resist the temptation to um, prior to ink being on a contract selling them the world. Oh
Yes.
yeah, call me anytime. Here's my personal cell phone on a business card and everything. No, just be honest. Be straightforward about what you can deliver. Help them understand where those limits are and why those limits are. And again, from the perspective of an MSP who is fixated almost wholly on the A of the CIA triad, um, here's this other organization that we can bring into the dialogue. They're going to be focused on other things. They're going to be the go-to for
Mhm.
security, compliance, risk, so on and so forth. And leverage that relationship to the extent possible. Like you said, MSPs who try to do security for their clients inevitably will butt up against a hard and fast rule. You can't serve two masters. And one of two things is going to happen. Either the service provider has a compromise and they're a potential threat to the client. And of course, their focus is going to be on their own operation and their other clients, not any one individual client. Or there's a compromise at the client that, puts the service provider and other clients at risk.
Mhm.
And again, I'll return you to the exact same statement. They're not going to be focused on, the best interests of the compromised client. And so those MSP organizations, they have a real conundrum that you can't resolve just by, we'll see what happens, we'll do what we have to. That is not the way this works. That is certainly not what we as practitioners would tell a client, that you can fly by the seat of your pants and succeed, because if you do succeed, it was entirely
Luck.
accidental, right? No skill involved in that case.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of close up here with that because it leads me to, I do a lot of GTM and a lot of sales enablement, and I'm not throwing any salespeople under the bus, but that's that's one of those things that I think is very important, because it's if, like you said, here's my personal number, call me anytime. I don't fault anybody for doing that. The fault is not knowing what you're able to do, and how was that communicated to the team that's out there. Have we actually spoken to the client, or has a couple of other people who know this much about the service. That's So I think we, on the service provider side, have a responsibility to make sure that all of that gets communicated properly, and then also on our responsibility to make sure those who are having those conversations and selling the engagements, they're aware of it, right? And they don't, because they're the ones that, they're ultimately going to oversell what we potentially can't deliver.
Right.
Awesome.
100%.
Well, Mike, this was awesome. Great time. Where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
Find me on LinkedIn. Mike Pedrick. Should be fairly easy to find. I think there's maybe 2 of us in the country, but my face will be in the profile there.
Outstanding. Well, it's great chatting with you, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon. I'll let everybody go. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Will.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.